Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some of the most badly designed campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Some of these campaigns are badly designed in Warhammer 3, others didn't make the transition in the best possible way into Immortal Empires. And that's what I want to talk about, just campaigns that have a lot of issues in them. Now, to be clear, having issues or bad design doesn't mean that the Legendary Lords in these campaigns are weak. In fact, some of the Legendary Lords on this list can be very strong. One of them is actually the best for his race, or rather the campaign mechanics he has also make him the strongest for his race. But let's go into that. So the first campaign to talk about is, of course, Balgar, Ironhammer of the Dwarves. Now, Balgar is a strong Legendary Lord. He has a very strong early game army. In fact, the army I have here, like these Quarrelers, Hammerers, Rangers, Grudge Throwers, along with the 4 heroes I have, this is an unstoppable army. People confuse a campaign having issues with a campaign being weak. Balgar is not weak, far from it. In fact, he's so powerful that on his own, maybe with his heroes, he could conquer potentially the entirety of Athaloran early game. Now, it's not advisable to do so because you're not really going to gain anything. But at the same time, it is a strength that Balgar has, because having starting heroes that start a higher level than normal gives you an insane power boost from the very beginning of his campaign. That doesn't mean his campaign is well designed. See, the issue in his campaign is he starts over here in the vaults, and he starts with plus 50% upkeep. His faction-wide benefits aren't really worth talking about. The benefits like, oh, leadership when laying siege. Yeah, I'm so terrified about my leadership situation when laying siege. The unique building, dogship building chain in Caracade Peaks, that's not really worth a damn. Vanguard deployment during underway battles, pretty pointless. Gotta say, pretty damn pointless. So his faction-wide benefits aren't really great. But the issue is, you start in the vaults, you take this territory, and you have that plus 50% upkeep, which means any army, just the lord of another army, is going to be like 600 upkeep. So you really want to get rid of that. The problem is, to get rid of that, you need to take and hold Caracade Peaks. The issue with that is Caracade Peaks is all the way here, and your core territory is vulnerable. So you have 3 ways of playing this campaign. One, you take, like in every one of them, you will take down the orcs over here. You'll get the Confederation event over here with Carahern, or they can give you money. I would probably actually go for the Confederation event and just sell the territory to Gelt. You'll probably get more money from that if you do so. Just worth saying that, as opposed to the 2,000 gold that the event will give you. I took the gold in this, but it was not the wisest decision, I gotta admit. But anyway, regardless of what you do, you take down the orcs, you get that event. And then your first choice is to go directly for Caracade Peaks. The problem with that, well, twofold. One, your core territory here is going to be vulnerable to Aranessa and to Ikeclaw, so they're going to wipe you out, and also Scrag. And also Forgrim over here, when I play as Balgar, he tends to lose. Though, hilariously enough, in this situation, both Forgrim and Skarsenik have managed to wipe themselves out. Like, their stacks, like, they're no longer here as faction leaders right here. So I imagine their armies have been eliminated, or they, for whatever reason, replaced them. So those are the 2 issues. Okay, the second option is to go directly here for Forgrim, save his ass against Skarsenik, and then go for Caracade Peaks. Same issue though, with your territory being vulnerable to Ikeclaw, Aranessa, and Scrag, and you will run out of money, by the way. And also, just taking Caracade Peaks directly means that you're gonna have to deal with Queek, Skarbrand, Malagor, Wurzag as well. That is not a great situation. Now, you could possibly just decide to eliminate Wurzag on your way to Caracade Peaks. That is actually a very doable thing to do, but still, you're going to have a very vulnerable territory. Or option 3, you just do what I've been doing in this particular playthrough, which is deal with Aranessa, then deal with Ikeclaw, then deal with Scrag, and then march on Caracade Peaks. The problem with that, Forgrim may be wiped out, and that will cause innumerable issues in your campaign if that happens, because that means you're going to have to deal with Skarsnik, and he's actually going to be able to throw a lot of forces against you. There's issues in regardless of any campaign plan. The problem I also see in this campaign is that your early game is not hard, but it's slow. It's slow because you can only really afford an army with your starting province. Most factions can afford like 2 armies with just a starting province, especially like a starting province like this, like the Vaults, where you do have some special structures, like a really good structure that gives you 500 income. You can only really afford the full stack as Balgar, given the massive costs involved. So your campaign start is going to be slow, it's going to be miserable, but once you take Karakay Peaks and you eliminate these enemies along the way, well, that's kind of it. Everything else is just fluff, it's pointless, it's boring. Because once you've taken Karakay Peaks and you can actually hold it against the enemies, well, no one can stop you. The upkeep situation is removed. That's why I mean this is a badly designed campaign. It's a campaign that the early game is excruciating, but once you get going, you get going. I mean, you already have a really, really powerful army. And so once you remove any limitations that Balgar has, he is an unstoppable horde. Only limited by the issues the dwarves have in terms of casualty replenishment, especially. Though I have to say, Balgar goes a long way towards the recruitment capacity situation that the dwarves have to deal with, because he can buff local recruit capacity in a province with his special skill line. So Balgar is really powerful, but this campaign just doesn't really work well. I mean, Skarsnik and Queek, I feel, who also race for Karakay Peaks, have just better campaign design, flat out. Because they don't suffer as much for not having Karakay Peaks, though you do want to take Karakay Peaks, like you're incentivized to take it. They don't suffer as much for not having it, so they can play around in a campaign. They have a lot of flexibility in their campaigns. And then when they do take Karakay Peaks, it's not a massive burst of power, though it is useful to have it. That's a better design of a campaign for Karakay Peaks as opposed to Balgar's excruciating start and then a massive burst of power he gets when he takes Karakay Peaks. That's where I stand on this. At number 4, we have Grand Hierophant Katep of the Tomb Kings. All of the Tomb Kings campaigns, including Archon the Black, who is very powerful, but all of them are broken in some fairly fundamental ways. But I'd argue that none more so than Katep. So Katep starts way over here in the Red Desert. It's actually a pretty good starting position in a lot of ways, because you only have this minor faction of greenskins to deal with, you have 4 regions, you only have to deal with an enemy that controls minor settlements, so it is a very easy, very chill starting location. And the factions that surround you are not especially hostile towards you, well, minus the Skaven, but that you will want to conquer. But outside of that, you're in a pretty good, chill starting position with a decent amount of territory that you can take. The problem of Katep is that even though he is very powerful, he has a relatively easy starting position, he does get extra Lich Priests, so he gets extra heroes, always nice to have as the Tomb Kings. The problem with Katep is that in order to win the campaign and achieve the short and long specifically long campaign victory condition, you need to make your way all the way back to Khemri. And Khemri, you start here, Khemri is way over here. You might start to understand the issue that you're going to encounter when playing this campaign. Now, for some people, that can be a really fun journey, going around halfway across the world. Absolutely. What you could do, for instance, there is a sea lane over here, and this sea lane will put you over here in Cafe. And using that, you can make your way through this territory, take the Celestial Riverlands, take other territory, the Mountains of Morn, and make your way from the east. And it can be a fairly interesting campaign. Although I also would consider it a pile of crap from that perspective, though it certainly can be the more unique legendary campaign or campaign for the Tomb Kings. Here's where it breaks down. When you arrive in Khemri, you can't confederate with the other Tomb King legendary lords. So when you arrive in Khemri, you're gonna have to go to war with Cetra, with Khalida, with Archon. You're gonna have to go to war with all of them and take the territory in order to win the campaign. That is really bad design. It's especially bad for Katep, who has to make his way halfway across the world in order to be able to do so. And you also need to awaken all 4 legions of legend via the mortuary cult for your short campaign victory condition. The legions are these 4 right here. They're not especially expensive, though. Anything that requires you to spend canopic jars is generally painful to deal with, and you do require to get some of these resources in order to achieve that. So the victory conditions are really the thing that drag it down. I don't really see the point in Katep having a campaign that forces him to make his way all the way back to Nehekara. Though, regardless of how you do it, you can certainly get back there before you've gotten to occupy, loot, raised, or sack 75 different settlements. But it's just really bad design. Another really bad design is, of course, with the Books of Nagash. The Books of Nagash are pretty annoying, and you gotta love with Katep, because Katep has books in different locations than the other Tomb King Legendary Lords. I mean, so does Khalida. Archon and Cetra share the same book locations. Khalida has a similar one, but like, you gotta love Katep's book location, because it's like, oh, you wanna head here, right? But most of the books are up in the north. So, in order to gain the books, which are important in a Tomb King campaign, you need to basically go the other way as opposed to where you actually want to end up being. I can't really see this campaign being very well designed. I don't think it makes sense within the context of Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, having a Tomb King Legendary Lord that has a long journey in his campaign could be fun, but it's just the lack of diplomatic options, the lack of confederation with other Tomb King Legendary Lords does end up ruining his campaign. I mean, Katep should never have to fight Cetra for his campaign victory conditions, considering his relationship with Cetra in the lore. So that's my issue with this. It is an issue, like the victory condition situation, it is an issue for all of them. I just say Katep has it the worst out of all of them. Number 3, we have Marcus Wolfheart of the Empire. Now, Marcus Wolfheart is the most powerful Legendary Lord of the Empire by far and away. The reason he's so powerful is that he can get high-tier units via the Imperial supply system. So, imagine getting Hellstorm rocket batteries within the first 20 turns. Imagine getting great cannons within the first 20 turns and having a ridiculous amount of campaign power because of that. Because with those cannons, you can take down walls, which means your siege battle situation is significantly easier than anything that either Volkmar, Gelt, or Karl Franz have to deal with. Well, Gelt does start with a great cannon unit, but he can't get multiple of those until much later on in his campaign. So Marcus has a great deal of power. He does also have some pretty sweet effects here with casualty replenishment, recruit rank benefits, recruit rank for Huntsman General, all that kind of good stuff. He has a lot of power. The issue in this campaign is the constant aggression that you have to deal with against the Lizardmen. So you can get supplies pretty quickly in a campaign, especially as you take more and more of Lustria. But what's going to happen very frequently in this campaign, and you can't stop it. If you could stop it, we would not put this campaign. I would not put this campaign on this list. But you can't stop it. You're going to have to deal with this bullshit system throughout the entire campaign. On one hand, it gives you a lot of power. On the other hand, it does affect your control level by a fairly significant amount. And you're going to constantly get the Lizardman Doomstack spawning randomly and attacking your territory, which is just really horrible design. It always has been horrible design to deal with this, and I'm pretty sure this is the least popular of the Legendary Lords of the Empire, just purely because of this horrible mechanic that you have to deal with. At least you don't have to deal with Imperial authority, all well and good, though you do have to take pretty much all of Lustria, but you have tools for it. You're just constantly going to be harassed by a stack of Lizardmen. They're not even that difficult to deal with, but just going to take resources, going to slow down your campaign, and it's just going to be really frustrating to deal with throughout the course of your campaign. That's really all there is to it when it comes to Marcus Wolfheart, just the constant annoyance. Like, I feel it's fine to have these armies spawn, though I think it would be much better if we had a system similar to the Wood Elves, where you get like, oh, this army is going to spawn here, and you get a couple of turns to set up for it. So it's not just a random location, or, you know, they're not just going to beeline it for the Temple of Kara, constantly harass you and and threaten you throughout the course of your campaign. Lots of power though in this campaign, great deal of power, great deal of potential, just really annoying and really bad design when it comes to it. And number 2 is Norska, and Norska suffers from the following issues. I mean, they do have a lot of power as a faction, but they do suffer from the following issues. First off, the monster hunts that they do have during the campaigns. They're pretty bugged, and even if they weren't bugged, the old quest system where you have to go do various objectives like, oh, recruit these units, go raid that territory, do all of that, can be really annoying to deal with in a campaign, even if it wasn't bugged, and it is bugged. And it's bugged because it's very easy for other AI factions to interfere. So say for instance, or for you to screw your own plans, like let's say you get the quest to raid Mindenheim, for instance. Well, let's say you take Mindenheim. Let's say you arrive there, you take Mindenheim. The reason you take Mindenheim is because raiding it does slow you down. So let's just say you arrive here, you sack it, you're gonna wait one turn, or you just take it over. Well, guess what? You just failed the quest. The monster hunt is bugged, and you won't be able to do it. That's one of the first issues when it comes to this particular campaign. Another issue that can be had when it comes to this particular campaign is that you need to occupy certain settlements in order to get access to research. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be a problem, except of course it interferes with your campaign plans or the dynamic nature of campaigns. Like, let's say you have an ally next to a territory and they take it. What are you going to do then? Well, guess what? You're screwed. So that's a problem when you tie research to occupying certain specific settlements. Like, it would be better if it was like, oh, occupy a dwarven provincial capital or 2 free provincial capitals from Bretonnia or the dwarves. But having to occupy some very specific settlements for significant research benefits is not really great design, considering the way things can and will go sideways during the course of a campaign. And finally, we have the god system. So when you're playing Norska, you want to get the allegiance of the gods. The problem with this particular allegiance is the following. While the benefits are very significant, Norska doesn't really have too much of an economy. I mean, their ports can generate a lot of money, but the regular economy doesn't generate all that much. The issue is that in order to gain favor with the gods, you need to raise a settlement to the ground and dedicate it to that particular god. But if you're sacking a settlement, you then can't just raise it. So it's gonna interfere with your ability to actually achieve allegiance with the gods. And even then, having to raise settlements does suck, because you may want to take those settlements for yourself for various benefits. So there's problems with the system. By the way, this allegiance system, obviously, you've got things that interfere with just like your campaign mechanics, because you need the money from sacking, but you also need to take over certain specific settlements, and then you need to raise settlements. It just leads to a fairly broken campaign system that you're dealing with if you're playing a Norskan campaign at the moment, be it Wulfric or Trog, the Troll King. A great deal of problem with that. Also, another problem is that the Norskan factions do hate each other, so they're likely going to end up at war. Like, if you're playing a Norskan campaign, you're likely going to end up at war with at least the Varg and maybe even the other Legendary Lord. Now, this isn't necessarily a problem because you can easily confederate, but confederating a vast swath of territory means that you have to defend that vast swath of territory, which, as you might imagine, can cause a lot of issues in your campaign. I just think it's overall pretty poorly designed campaign, and I think Norska has not really been that great of a faction for a very, very long time, even going back in the days of Warhammer 2. I mean, they just got the release version, they got some improvements along the way, but clearly this is a faction that could really use a paid DLC to achieve their full potential and fix some of the issues that they do currently have. Until that point, Norska is just going to continue having issues in their campaign. Then, of course, there is Keyslav and number 1. Where to start with Keyslav? Well, let's start with the geographic situation. The minor provinces of Keyslav, be it the Western Oblast, Troll Country, the Eastern Oblast, or the Southern Oblast, the fact that they're only minor regions in these provinces make them worthless. And certainly of far less value than having proper provincial capitals, with the exception of course, being able to get governors for certain provinces and the benefits they provide. Of course, there is benefits in having a lot of provinces in Keyslav, just not these ones. So they're not good provinces to have. They're not easily defendable, gonna be hard to defend. Even if they had proper provincial capitals, they would still be a hell to defend them. So that's the first issue Keyslav has, that the terrain they actually have is pretty badly designed. Like, the actual map area of Keyslav is not well designed at all. Then there's the free big cities. The free big cities on the surface seem really good. The problem is their economic potential is very limited, and you're actually going to be spending a lot more money in these things than you're going to get back. Now, mind you do still want to spend the money because you do get significant benefits. For instance, from Frostholm, you can get little Groms and heavy war sleds, and at tier 3 you can get light war sleds. So there is certainly power benefits from these structures from the special cities. But the problem is, in order to get those benefits, you need to control those cities. So Prague is always going to be a city anyone can take, but the other, like as Kastaltin, Keyslav is controlled by Katrin. You can get the research benefits, of course, because your research is actually tied to either having an alliance with the person who controls them or controlling them themselves. Like, tying research to specific cities can be a problem in its own right, but it was such a problem that they had to change it from direct control to being able to get the ability to research the things tied to a city if you just have a military alliance. On top of that, we have the supporter system and, of course, the invocation system. The invocations are pretty horrible because the cost of devotion will go up the more territory you control. And you do want to maintain these invocations if you're playing as Katrin or Kastaltin especially, because you want the supporters. Specifically, you want to maintain Ursun, capture a lot of territory to win the supporter race, because you do gain some pretty significant benefits. And actually, you do need to win the supporter race or you'll lose your campaign. On top of that, of course, you also need to win the supporter race to achieve success when it comes to your short campaign victory condition. Tying your short campaign victory condition as either Katrin or Kastaltin to getting 600 supporters is ridiculous, because it's actually going to take longer to get 600 supporters on average than it would for most factions to even achieve their long campaign victory condition, as opposed to just the short one. So that is a pretty significant issue when we're talking about Kastaltin or Katrin's campaign. So the supporter system, pretty awful. The invocation system, pretty awful. The devotion system as well, because devotion costs going up for invocations, and invocations being important for supporters, but it going up the more territory you control. Pretty awful to deal with, pretty bad design. And on top of that, just like having to fill up this meter over here to be able to confederate the other one, severely limits your campaign potential. It says a lot about the Keyslav campaign that Boris Ursus, who is the only playable Keyslav campaign, doesn't have to worry about the supporter system. He gets benefit to invocations because he can gain devotion from the Cast Wasteland, and he does start in the Northern Cast Wastes. So it says a lot. Like, as Boris, you don't have to care about supporters because you can gain some benefits, but you're not in a rush to do so. So you have a lot more flexibility in your campaign, you have less stress, you have less annoyance, you have less issues to deal with when it comes down to your campaign situation. And keep in mind, this was a race that was designed for new players. Well, I'd say mission completely failed over there by Creative Assembly. On top of that, the fact that so many structures, these special structures, as well as the churches, do cost quite a bit of devotion, is also something that is just really badly designed at the moment for Keyslav, given the fact that they can only earn devotion from fighting Chaos. Well, what about Skaven? What about Greenskins? What about the Vampires? All of which you may face in a Keyslav campaign. Those don't give you devotion, because only Chaos, Norsk, Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos give you devotion. Beastmen as well. So plenty of issues when it comes to this particular mechanic, to the supporter mechanic, to the design of Keyslav as a part of the map, especially in Immortal Empires. Not that Keyslav was that well designed in Realms of Chaos, it was not, and all these minor regions or all these minor provinces don't really work very well in a campaign at the moment. So those are the issues with Keyslav, and those are some of the most broken campaigns currently in the game that just aren't really worth playing. I mean, it's not like the Legendary Lords are weak necessarily. I mean, yes, Keyslav can be pretty weak, absolutely, but out of all of the Legendary Lords that I've talked and put on this list, it's only Keyslav that is especially weak. All the others, like Norsk can be pretty strong, Marcus Wolfheart can be pretty strong, Balgar is very strong, Katep is very strong. It's not about strength or difficulty in their campaigns, it's do the mechanics work very well. And quite frankly, a lot of the mechanics just don't for those campaigns.